Okay, now you're co-host again, Dr. Muhammad. You can speak and share whatever you want. Hello. Yes. Dr. Muhammad, you're co-host now.
Okay, yeah, but sorry, I went up by mistake. Anyway, so I said I wanted to share my screen. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullah. My session today is called the grammar lesson that everybody should take, which you probably haven't taken as yet. Let me introduce myself real quick. I know Muhammad did this, but
I'm sorry, can I just ask you for something, Dr. Muhammad?
Yes,
just raise your voice a little bit.
Raise my voice, okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Let me double check if my microphone is working.
No, that's fine. That's fine. Now it's fine.
Okay. Maybe it's the internet or some. Okay, how about now? Is it any better now?
Yeah, it's great.
Okay, it should be a lot better now because I'm using my earphones. Anyway, so I am an English trainer and I'm a teacher as well. I studied my master's degree, University of Leicester in the UK, and I established East meets West Educational Services. Thank you very much, Elsa, for inviting me to give this chance, to have this chance of being with a group of wonderful people. I'm honored to be here with you tonight. Let's start the session by running the goals by you. We will learn in this grammar session, inshallah. You will learn about the English lesson that grammar that everybody needs to take. And we will talk a little bit about the theory that underlies or underpins this grammar lesson. I'll start by a story, actually. Early in the 1990s, there was a child in a government school in Cairo, Egypt. And that child was smart, but he was not doing very well in his English class. After he started studying English, well, after all, he started studying English in only grade 7. So we can't really blame him for not being so good in English in middle school. Now, back then, schools in Egypt, if you know, were not really teaching English from a primary school like now. So let's call this child M. That's his name, right? In the middle school classes, M mentioned that he only had one lesson, and that was verb to be. And he actually failed to understand that lesson clearly. We teachers know that we don't teach verb to be only in middle schools in Egypt, but we understand what he means by saying, I studied verb to be only. He meant that he was studying tenses and he did not understand fully what those tenses mean. You know, all EFL book studies start off, you know, at the very, very beginning chapters by teaching the present simple and the present continuous and so on. And verb to be is a very important part of these lessons. Unfortunately, grammar, especially tenses, were and still are what students study mainly in government schools in the Arab world, and generally speaking, in EFL curricula around the world. Now, to M, real English was not like that in the books that he studied at school at all. When English to him was the fabulous, flowy, fancy tunes that actors and actresses spoke in movies that were popular when he was a teenager, that he would watch weekly at Thursday night. To him, to M, English was that of Brad Pitt in Seven, Bruce Willis's in Die Hard, and Tom Hanks's in Forrest Gump, John Travolta's and Nicolas Cage's in Face Off, and Julia Roberts in Pretty Woman. Muhammad Ibrahim wants Julia Roberts now on the screen, but instead I will show him a picture of Richard Gere because he too
I prefer
starred in Pretty Woman. You don't expect Julia Roberts.
No, like I prefer Catherine Zeta.
Yeah, she is that old too, you know. Muhammad and I were born in the 70s, guys. So
yeah,
most
our
probably,
generation, huh?
Yeah, that's our generation, exactly. So to M would always ask himself, a question that he wouldn't dare ask his teacher, Mr. Hassan. And the question was, how can what we're studying at school, I am, he is, they are, teach me to speak English like those people in the movies? Those irrelevant lessons were past simple, past continuous, past perfect, and so on. And the more of these lessons that were added, the more bewildered M became. He really wanted his school to teach him how to listen and speak and read and write. He wanted to understand the movies without reading the subtitles in Arabic. And he wanted to sing like Michael Jackson's, and they don't really care about us. I don't know if you even know that song, guys. Anyways, at school, however, tenses were the only one that he studied. No movies, and no, they don't care about us. But surprisingly, despite the traditional approach that they were following in school, which really switched M off, his English was actually improving. So M's spoken English was actually improving, and so was his vocabulary. And by high school, he was actually using idiomatic expressions too, and his pronunciation was notably better than that of his classmates. For the grammar tests that he would take at school, M would always use his gut feeling. And he actually got good marks on his exams. He actually loved the language, but he hated the grammar lessons. Now, you now may ask a logical question, same logical question that I thought of when I go over this story, which is, why did M struggle in his grammar lessons, but actually managed to improve his speaking and his language sense? Or in other words, what was the problem with the way the grammar was taught at school that a person who was actually capable of using the language well failed to understand its grammar? I thought about this question a lot, but it was not until I read a language theory that I will talk about, inshallah, later on in a session. And I had an interesting conversation with two illiterate people, Abdullah and Zulfikar, that you can see on the screen. Both of them were illiterate. They couldn't read or write. It was not until then, when I read the theory and met with these two people, that I actually found the answer to my question. The answer comes from how these two people learn to speak in Arabic when they come to Saudi Arabia or Gulf countries. Just like all Pakistanis and Indians and Asian people, they come from their countries, most of them not knowing how to speak a word in Arabic. And in a matter of months, like all those who live in the Gulf area will notice, they start picking up the language and they start expressing themselves very well. No, I wouldn't say very well, but pretty well, especially in work-related contexts. And if you can express yourself in work-related contexts, you are at level A2 on CFR or so. Now, I want you to listen, or basically listen and read the following two conversations between me and these two gentlemen, that they were both doormen, for the building that I live in. And tell me which of the conversations you understand better. By the way, Abdullah, this guy here, by the time we had that conversation, he was in Saudi Arabia for about a year, but Zulfikar was here, like forever. So I said, that's what I said to him. رحت يا عبد الله رحت محل إصلاح المكيفات زي ما قلت لك, right? So this is what Abdullah replied. He said, العصر في روح مكة عمرة في تعبان بكرة في روح إن شاء الله. And this is how they speak actually, if you laugh and now saying why he's speaking like this. Anyway, so I think you agree with me that the meaning of what Abdullah said was not all that clear. So Zulfikar was there, and he thought the meaning was not clear either. So he tried to help Abdullah explain what he was trying to say. So Dhulfaqar said, Abdullah fi ruh al-asr al-yawm. Nafar means a man. Nafar mukayifat fi يروح عمره أمس. نفر مكيفات في يجي أمس تعبان. Abdullah fi يروح بكرة inshallah. Now, I think you agree with me that the second conversation is a lot clearer, or a second message was a lot clearer than the first message. Now, why is the second message a lot clearer? The answer is simple, because Dhulfaqar used complete sentences and Abdullah did not use complete sentences. Now, look at the two conversations broken down for you now. Abdullah said, Al-Asr fi ruh. Dhulfaqar said, Abdullah fi yuruh al-Asr al-yawm. So now we know who is going, when he's going, and everything. Abdullah said, fi ruh Makkah Umrah. So we don't know who's going, for Umrah. But what Dhulfaqar said, he said, Nafar mukayifat fi yuruh Umrah ams. Very, very clear. Abdullah said, Umrah fi ta'ban. We don't know, again, who the subject of the sentence is. But what Dhulfaqar said is Nafar mukayifat fi yiji ams ta'ban. So he was very, very, clear. And lastly, Abdullah said, Bukra fi ruh inshallah. And Dhulfaqar said, Abdullah fi bukra ruh inshallah. So I knew what was going to happen on that bukra. Although both of them had errors, Dhulfaqar's sentences had 3 elements. And those 3 elements helped the message get through. Dhulfaqar's sentences, if you look at the screen, you will find that they have a subject, they have a verb, and they have a completion. Abdullah did not have all these in his sentences, so his message was really bewildering. And this means something really, really, really important. It's actually deceptively simple. You might think it's easy, but it's common sense, but it's not really common at all. Not many people, think at that level. And that is sentences with all 3 basic parts: the subject, the verb, and the completion. Even if the sentence has errors in the verb, sentences with all 3 parts are clear to understand than incomplete sentences which are missing any of those parts. It's a common sense idea, but in reality, the vast majority of our students don't know that reality. Now, when I had that conversation and I started thinking about it, I could understand why M, was confused at school. The English that M studied at school was making him more like Abdullah, supposedly able to form sentences correctly, and I'm saying supposedly because he couldn't, but unable to produce a complete sentence correctly. So he's able to make verbs, but he can't make sentences. All the EFL books that I've seen in 25 years of teaching do the same thing. They start with teaching tenses, the present simple, the present continuous, the past continuous, what's not. But before doing so, they fail to show the students the bigger picture and show them that the verb is only one part of that bigger picture. The bigger picture is we have a sentence. It has a subject, a verb, and a completion, and a verb is only one part of the sentence. I will say this again. Our students are looking at English through a microscope that is only focused on the verb. And they look through that microscope at the verb in great detail, and they analyze it very thoroughly. But they're never told to zoom out and look at the bigger picture, to look at the whole sentence that the verb is only one part of. I'll say it again. The first lesson EFL books teach is tenses. The first lesson EFL books should teach is the sentence and its 3 parts: subject, verb, completion, or SVC, full stop. Now, what is that theory that helps me understand the problem at that level and know that I was on the right track? The theory is Universal Grammar by Noam Chomsky, one of the most popular linguists and politicians in the world, or one of the most popular ever, actually. And some of you will ask now, إطلع إيش يعني Universal Grammar ده حضرة العمدة? I will tell you now the Universal Grammar what it is, if you're still asking. Have you heard of Universal Grammar before? Anyone? Universal Grammar by Noam Chomsky. You might want to write in the chat. Muhammad will read for me. Meanwhile, I will tell you. The name of the theory itself explains what universal grammar means. It means grammar everywhere in the world is similar. Universal grammar. And why is it similar? Because language is in our genes. And the whole world actually speaks different variations of the same basic structure. And that basic structure of the language actually comes built in our brain. So we're born with it. Now, when we are born in an environment, when a different variation of that basic structure is used, say Arabic, for example, there is something that Noam Chomsky called the language acquisition device, or he called it the LAT. That LAT kicks in and then starts picking, the different variation of the grammar, and then we start speaking Arabic. Noam Chomsky explains that all natural human languages have universal properties, so they have things in common. One of these properties is that we have subject and a verb and an object or a completion. All languages in the whole world have these: subject, verb, and object or completion. Okay, so far so good. Hopefully, if you have any questions, you can jot them down, you can write them down, and I will answer them later on. So LAD is a basic capability that is built in, and it enables us to understand, languages. And one part of that basic system of the language is that all languages have a subject, a verb, and a completion. For learning English, before learners should study correct tenses, before we give them this in EFL books, which is very, very specific in English, this is only one word. Correct tenses is only the verb. We need to activate the LAD language acquisition device of the learners by teaching them that universal structure that all the languages have, the subject, verb, completion structure. Now, the question now is, how many simple sentence structures are there in English that we need to learn? You might want to write the answer again in the chat. I'll take a look at the chat. Everything is clear? Good. So, okay, so again, the question is, how many types of simple sentences should we teach the children? How many types do we have in English? You might want to write in the chat. Okay, you might think that there is only one, but there are actually four types that learners need to study. And all four types, I will explain to you now in a simple, hilarious story. It's fun, but you can easily lose track while I'm telling you the story. So get yourself a cup of coffee, cup of tea, maybe get some kahk al-Eid and stay focused with me. Now, once upon the very beginning of time, actually, not just time, people lived in caves, and they had only very, very few items to talk about in this simple world. They had food and water, animals that they were hunting or running away from. They had clothes, and women had only two places to hang around: the jungle and the cave. There was nowhere else to go. Now, the language was just enough to reflect that simple life. It turned out to them that all what they needed were three words only. If you put these three words together, then you will get a meaningful communication that the other person would understand. And the three words were subject, or the doer of the action, an entity capable of doing something like an animal or something. And the second word, was a verb, some kind of action that they do, like we hunt, we eat, we cook. And the third word was some kind of a, somebody or something that receives that action, receive the verb. And we call this, now we call it the object. Now, different cave people arranged those three words in, subject, verb, object in different orders to form the simplest interaction, what we call now the simple sentence. And let's see how Japanese people and English people and Arab people arrange the three parts of the sentence, differently. Let's start with the Japanese people. Japanese people actually used the structure subject, object, verb. So they started with the subject and then they mentioned the object and then they mentioned the verb. So their sentences became like women sushi cooked. And that's a correct sentence in Japanese. Now, what did English people, cave people choose, do you think? They chose something equally easy, which is subject, verb, object. So to them, a simple sentence was women cooked sushi. Now, our ancestors, Arab people, what do you think they did? They were really, really on top of things. They came up with all different word orders in the world. So they had women cooked mumbar, cooked women mumbar, mumbar cooked women, women mumbar cooked. And if you translate all of these words in Arabic, they're actually correct. You guys, your language is very, very difficult, a lot more difficult than English. And of course, the meaning of all these words depends on the tashkil. And the Quran, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, إِنَّمَا يَخْشَى اللَّهَ min ibadihi al-ulama'u. So the subject and a verb, regardless of the order, from the tashkil. Right. So these are, the sentence patterns in Arabic: subject, verb, object, just like English, and then verb, subject, object, object, verb, subject, subject, object, verb. So we leave Arabic alone because Arabic is really difficult, and we will continue with the English cave people. But please allow me to keep the Mumbar because Muhammad Ibrahim and I love Mumbar very much. So I will use it in English. Right. So for the English cavemen, life is very good with the positive women cooked Mumbar sentence. Everything was running smoothly and they were talking to each other, interacting and everything. But they did not all of a sudden have food. Why is that? Because women started rebelling. They had issues. They were bored with, only cooking and hanging around in the jungle and taking care of the children. They didn't have any malls. They didn't have any cinemas. There was no shopping, and they refused to cook. So now what happened? Men needed a sentence to say that women did not cook the mumbar, and this necessitated that a negative sentence was born. Women not cooked mumbar, or subject not, verb object. Now, not only that, but actually the question sentence was also born because women would now need to call from the jungle to ask the women if they were ready to cook the mumbar, or should men, order a delivery from mumbar hut. So cook women mumbar, or verb, subject, object with this tone of voice. Now it was born as well. And when that continued for a long time, women not cooking the mumbar for the men started becoming harsh and they needed to give women orders. So now the sentence cook mumbar was born. They were given an order with the sentence pattern, verb, subject with that tone of voice, right? So let's repeat again. English has 4 sentence types, and this is how English started. Positive, subject, verb, object. Negative, subject not, verb, object, question, verb, subject, object, and order, verb, verb, object. Okay. Now, for those who taught in a national curricula or who studied English, I know what you're thinking about. Those types of sentences that I'm talking about are pretty similar to declarative, interrogative, imperative, and exclamatory, and What I'm saying is not correct, and those at the bottom of the screen are the correct ones. But remember, we are talking about cave people, so that was millions of years ago, and we're talking about actually beginner learners of English. So we can't really teach them, those at the bottom. I prefer if we teach, the simple ones that I'm talking about. So, is that story really difficult to teach our children? Do you remember Mr. Hassan? Mr. Hassan was a good English teacher, but why did he fail to teach them that lesson? I think Hassan was following the book to the T, and it never dawned on him, that he needs to teach the simple sentence structure first before going into detail of the verb itself. Now, how long would it take you to explain this hilarious, oversimplified caveman story, of the sentence types? I think you agree with me that just like the doorman, the fakar, if the students can understand how a sentence, is put together, even if the tense in the sentence is wrong, just like the fakar speaks until today, it will be much, much better than knowing a tense in a vacuum and not being able to use it in meaningful communication. It's only after students understand these 4 sentence patterns that we teachers should start to introduce correct tenses to them. For beginner learners of English, a teacher needs to explain to them that word order makes different types of sentences. So how can you make negative and positive and questions? It's by changing the order of the words in the sentences. But the different verb forms, only the verb, makes the different tenses. This, again, maybe for us teachers is a simple fact, and you guys are advanced users of English, but for our students, beginner students, if this was not taught, explicitly taught, students, the odds are those kids will not learn English and they will struggle. Now you know what I meant by the session title, the grammar lesson that everyone should take, which you probably haven't taken yet. This is what I meant by it. I meant that teaching simple sentence types should be taught before we teach tenses. Now, this is not the only grammar lesson which we did not study in school. I was planning on, carrying on, giving you another type of sentences, but I thought the session would be super long. So inshallah, there will be part 2, and I will tell you about another grammar session that you should have studied at school, which you didn't. Now, let me summarize the points we talked about today, inshallah. Before we teach tenses, we need to teach the simple sentence structure of subject, verb, completion, or object. Call it whatever you want to call it, but I prefer the word completion because not every completion is an object. Lesson number 2, we need to explain not only the positive sentence, but we need to explain also the negative sentence, the question sentence, and the order sentence. And by the way, all of these are called sentences. Some people think that declarative sentences are only called sentences, but a question is a sentence, exclamatory sentence or order is a sentence. All of these are sentences. Lesson number 3, all 4 types of sentences must be taught in a simplified way. And we should not focus at all on the tenses and the complications of having a linking verb. So we should start the question with the linking word, or that's an action verb. So we start with verb to do in the appropriate tense, and then we put the main verb later on. Don't get there. When you teach that lesson in the beginning, just go simple, just like the cave people story. Subject, not verb object, and make them produce, wrong sentences, no problem. Verb, subject, object, and that would be a question, no problem. Let them produce wrong sentences in the beginning. Don't get too, complicated stuff. Lesson number 4. We need to explain that different sentence types are possible by changing the word order of the sentence. And what I mean is subject, verb completion for the positive sentence, verb subject completion for the question, and so on. But tenses, to be able to express, the past and the future and the present and so on, those necessitate a change to the verb alone. Now, so number 5. All the ideas above are actually compatible with the theory, universal grammar, by Noam Chomsky. Now, one thing I know that you need to know, which is what happened to M, the boy that we started the story with. Actually, M became an English teacher, a teacher trainer, and he took his master's degree from University of Leicester in England, and he started a company for providing educational services, and he called it East Meets West Educational Services. He started in Delaware, the States, and he has been teaching or talking to you for the past 40 minutes or so. Thank you very, very much for listening.
Thanks a lot, Dr. Muhammad. Wallahi, let me tell you something. When you gave me the title of the session, I was wondering, what is he going to say? يعني خلاص, grammar has been discussed million times. What is Shelby going to do in this session? But really, I'm amazed by this session. Your way of presenting the topic, the new idea, it really amazed me. So thanks a lot. And waiting for part 2 for the second grammar lesson that we have never thought of. Thanks a lot. Wallahi, I'm speechless. Really. I'm not just saying that because you're my guest. I'm really speechless. It's something new for me. So thank you. Thanks.
I just want to say something real quick, Mr. Muhammad, if you allow me, before we close the session, because I'm afraid that people might have thought that I was encouraging you to watch movies and so on, and that's not what I meant. I'm not promoting watching movies. I'm actually, for this word, I'm against that. I believe that those who were born before the 2000s just didn't have the privilege of having YouTube and access to tons of materials. So I sincerely recommend that you don't watch movies, but watch the news, watch documentaries in English. Follow English YouTubers and other social media influencers who present, their content in English, and learn English from them. And by the way, I'm one of those who, social media, content creators who speak English all the time for that same, purpose, because I want people to listen to English. So I'll leave the floor again now to Mr. Muhammad. If people have any questions, I'm ready to answer them. If not, then it's your call, sir.
By the way, we will send you all the links for Shelby, the YouTube channel, the Facebook account, anything that will help you to reach his content, his great and useful content. Of course, we will send this in the Telegram channel that we specifically have for our sessions. So if you have any questions, people are just thanking. If you have any questions, I'd like to thank you. Thank you very much. I highly appreciate you. Is it recorded? Yes, it is recorded, but I guess for such a session, we're going to collect money.
Muhammad, we can't hear you well. We can hear you better now, but
you can hear me now? Yeah,
we can.
Okay. Someone is asking, is it recorded? I'm saying, yeah, it is recorded, but we're going to collect money for that. I'm not going to send it for free. This is it's a precious session.
And can I have access to it for free?
Of course, you're going to have your percentage. Dr. Muhammad Al-Qadi is here. Welcome.
MashaAllah, MashaAllah. Mr. Muhammad, how are you? I mean, Dr. Muhammad.
Yeah, so comment, please.
If you have any
if she could use your story.
Oh, please do, and feel free to use it. Definitely. It's not copyrighted. It's for everyone to use, inshallah. Thank you for asking.
Yeah, the session is recorded. Inshallah, it's going to be sent on the channel soon, as soon as it's converted from Zoom. So, any questions? Yeah, Mr. Muhammad wants to speak. Okay, just give me a second. Yeah.
Thank you.
You can speak now, Dr. Muhammad.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thanks, Muhammad Ibrahim, first for this great surprise. Having Muhammad Shelby today is really wonderful. Thank you, Muhammad. It has been really awesome. Thank you. MashaAllah, MashaAllah. Actually, you know what got my interest in your presentation today is your mention of universal grammar. Because actually it was an integral part of my master thesis. I use universal grammar as a kind of showing the parameters in a contrastive linguistic study between the use of the English article system and the articles in Arabic language. So if teachers actually know or have some idea about this universal grammar, they can target the structures that may pose difficulty for their learners when they teach English or when they learn English. So just by this, they can give some kind of focus upon teaching these structures. Regarding the point, Dr. Muhammad, you mentioned about ESL and EFL books, which I agree with you to a big extent. Always they start with
I would say EFL more than ESL.
Of sentences. But here maybe Muhammad Ibrahim is completely aware of this because he's teaching in American school, and strangely enough, in grammar books in American curriculum, like for example, the elements of grammar, Muhammad, we have been teaching in Harcourt and HMH. The first lesson is the different types of the sentence structures.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Which is declarative, imperative, and so on. So so far I haven't actually figured out why don't we have the same order in also EFL books.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Actually, Doctor, sir, if you allow me, inshallah, in part 2, I will include a video of Dr. Suhair Sukkari, and most of those interested in translation and English and so on know her. She's really a star. And she was talking about the English first language and second language English being a lot weaker. And that's, in my own opinion, that's one aspect of it. The fact that they start EFL books and first language books, not EFL, sorry, ESL books and first language books by teaching, different sentence types, but not reading EFL books. Sir.
Oh, yeah. Thanks, Dr. Muhammad. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Dr. Muhammad, for being with us, and Dr. Muhammad Rushdie is here too. MashaAllah, يعني
good that I didn't know, because I would have been frantic to death. Those stars are here, and now I'm talking in front of them.
Okay, guys. Thanks a lot. Thanks, Dr. Muhammad, Shelby, for your great presentation. Thanks, everybody, for attending and waiting for the second part, inshallah, together.
Sure.
Thank you. See you soon.
Thank you, Dr. Rushdie.
See you in a couple of weeks.
Thank you, Mr. Ibrahim. Thank you so much.
From Let's Nights. Thanks a lot. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you, Amina. Alaikum assalam. Thank you, Mr.